Welcome to the Nobel Peace Center and the Nobel Peace Talk tonight. My name is Ingvild Bryn Rambøll. I'm Head of Information here at the Nobel Peace Center. And the Nobel Peace Talk series is a series with topics related to the latest Peace Prize. Last December, the Peace Prize was awarded to Maria Corina Machado, the opposition leader in Venezuela. Thank you. And after a dramatic journey, Maria Corina managed to come to Oslo. She did not come in time for the ceremony in the City Hall, as you might remember, but she did come in time to open the exhibition about herself here at the Nobel Peace Center. And we're still showing that exhibition upstairs. It's called Democracy on the Brink. And if you haven't seen it, I recommend you to do so after the talk we have here tonight. And I don't know about you, but for me, December seems quite a long while ago. A lot of things have happened. As you might remember, Nicolás Maduro was arrested in a spectacular military operation by the US in the beginning of January. And after that, Venezuela seems to have lost its place in the world headlines, because, as we all know, more dramatic events have been evolving in the Middle East. But tonight we will put the spotlight back on Venezuela and on the situation for political prisoners and human rights there. Because, as you will probably see if you see the exhibition and when you see the events that we have here at the Peace Center, we don't only talk about the political topics and high-level events happening around the Peace Prize. We also want to investigate how these situations affect people on the ground, and that is where our eyes will be in this event tonight. So what has changed after what happened in January, and what has not changed? That is something we will look closer into. And we are very lucky then to be joined by a man who has 25 years of experience in working for justice for political prisoners in Venezuela, and who is still in the center of developments there. Alfredo Romero is the director of the NGO Foro Penal. He is joining us live from Caracas. I hope we will see him appear on the screen. Right on cue, there he is, Alfredo Romero. Good morning to you. We are so happy to have you joining us. How are you doing?
Very good. Good morning, and I would like to thank you for the invitation. I'm very glad to be with you today.
So, can you give us an introduction to the work you are doing for political prisoners in Venezuela? Alfredo Romero, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you so much. Well, old woman who today is waiting desperately for answers. I see her regularly. She probably comes today to our office. Victor, her son, was detained in January 2025, and authorities claim that he was carrying explosives, but his mother insists that he was just carrying chocolates, a simple gift for her. From that moment on, he simply disappeared. I hate to say that, but this is not an unusual situation in Venezuela that is still happening right now. No official records, no formal accusation, no access to a lawyer, no communication at all. And for more than a year, just silence in this specific case and as well as others. Only recently, some detainees released from the notorious Rodeo 1 prison reported that Victor was there, and they had saw him, and they said that by October 2025, Victor was gravely ill and was taken out of the prison. Since then, absolutely nothing. No one knows where he is. No one confirms where he's alive, whether he's alive or not. His mother goes to from one tribunal to another. We have accompanied her. She asks the prosecutor office. She asks the ombudsman. She has asked anyone who might listen, and nobody answered. Only silence, and that silence is not accidental in Venezuela. It's structural, and this is not just the story of Victor Quero. Victor Quero is just one of at least 485 political prisoners currently in Venezuela. And according to Foro Penal, the organization that I'm the director, this is the number. Okay, for 25 years, we as Foro Penal have provided pro bono legal and humanitarian assistance to more than 15,000 people that have been detained, tortured, disappeared, and families of those that have been killed. These people have been physically and emotionally and also economically damaged. They haven't seen any material or moral compensation and no justice at all. Of course, since January of this year, some positive things has happened. After January, more than 700 political prisoners have been released. It is a big number in comparison to the past, and thousands of former political prisoners that used to have freedom restrictions have obtained their full freedom. This is a positive development, of course. There is an amnesty law that was enacted last February. However, still, it is still presenting the victims, such as political prisoners, as criminals and terrorists. At this moment specifically, the release of political prisoners has slowed. We see like the process is being in some way paralyzed. And I just want to tell you something, and that we feel, of course, in I would say, temporary, an indefinite, temporary but indefinite situation with uncertainty, but we still feel the same in the same system that still operates, and it operates like a labyrinth, like a Kafkaesque labyrinth, where justice is always out of reach and uncertainty is the rule. When you go to courts, for example, which are supposed to be independent, and you ask for answers, they basically say, "Sorry, we are waiting for superior orders," and they said like if that was like the regular situation, the normal situation of a judicial system. So of course, the judicial system, as I said, is not independent at all. We're still in a system where you are accused without knowing why. You are detained without evidence. You are judged without defense, punished without a conviction. And if you're convicted without any evidence. Today, for example, there are some Venezuelans that are still in jail for more than 7 years right now at this moment, and they don't even know why they are formally accused. They are in pretrial detention without any information, with silence. Today, Venezuela is in what we, as I said before, we can describe it as a temporary but indefinite reality. And politically speaking, we see an interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, who occupies that role, but is in essence is like a temporarily but permanent role, even though it's interim. And actually, they say that this interim government is sustained by the expectation that Nicolás Maduro is coming back. So, but this ambiguity, and it's important to know, is not accidental. It's part of a design. It's part of a strategy, because silence, as I said, is uncertainty. But uncertainty, we have learned that is also power, and time and uncertainty benefits these kind of authoritarian regimes. And I just want to talk about something that is important. We have called the monster, because behind this uncertainty that stands, behind this uncertainty, there is this repression machinery. And that's what we call the monster. And for years, it has been this monster has been detaining, disappearing, and even torturing people. And this monster is still intact. It has not disappeared. It's simply, as I see it, waiting for something to happen. This monster has two essential components. The first one is the national security apparatus, police forces, intelligence agencies, and prison centers. And they're still intact. And the second component of the monster is the judicial system. And the judicial system, here lies the core of the problem. Because in Venezuela, the judicial system, and as I said before, is not independent, but for many years, it has acted as an instrument to consolidate power and as a weapon for political persecution. So specifically at this moment, there is no access to justice. So there is no right to defense. Lawyers are denied access, even in the case of Victor Quero, of Carmen Teresa Navas that I was talking about. They don't even get or received any, for example, habeas corpus or whatever lawsuits that we want to file. Um, it, but I just want to tell you that this is intentional. And it is a strategy to maintain control through, as I was saying, fear and uncertainty. And that's something that is still there. That is why the case of Victor Quero is so important. Is so important in the case of his mother, Carmen Teresa Navas, because it reflects the same operation, the same thing that many victims in Venezuela has suffered. So a woman, a man, even a child disappears. This is usual. The mother searches for them, or the father, or the family. The institution remains silent, and that silence becomes the message. The message, what is the message? You can be next. So I just want to tell you, and I don't want to spend too much time in this introduction, um, that even though that, as I said before, even though the monster is still there, even though the judicial system agents function as puppets of this monster, we still think that there are positive expectations. However, we don't fully know how to escape this labyrinth. Um, of course, we don't have like the magic solutions. We feel in some way trapped, but there is this conviction, at least, that fear is not uh, just a sign of weakness, but we can in some way use this fear in order to create this new, I would say, monster, but a monster for peace and justice. And I think this monster for peace and justice has in some way awakened. I see the families um, like losing, families of political prisoners specifically losing fear. I feel more organizations or more civil society losing fear in some way. We in some way feel that we can express ourselves in a better way, because fear in some way has been reduced. After 25 years, as you said, working with political prisoners and victims, I witnessed that many have been released, and families and victims are increasingly, as I said, speaking out and refusing silence. And we are all together at this moment. But again, uh, I, I will end with this. We still into this labyrinth. We still looking for something that actually will transform this system to a system of a democratic system and respectful of human rights, but we haven't at least got it yet. But as Nelson Mandela said, everything seems impossible until it is done. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Alfredo Romero, and for finishing off with a quote from Nelson Mandela, as we are actually sitting in the room that bears his name. This room is called the Mandela Room, so that was even more appropriate than you probably knew. I just want to ask you, Alfredo, if he's still, yeah, he's still there.
Okay.
A lot of, almost 9 million people have fled Venezuela, a lot of them for political reasons. Can you give us some insights into how safe it will be for them to return now in the current political situation? We know one of them is the Nobel Peace Prize laureate, Maria Corina Machado. So how safe is it for political opposition figures like her to come back to Venezuela right now?
Yeah, that's exactly the question, and that's exactly the problem with the monster that I was talking about. If we still have this monster there, it is, I would say, not secure for a person like Maria Machado to come back. Actually, she's being threatened that if she come back, she's gonna be taken to prison, and that's something that's been actually being said publicly in some way, implicitly. So, of course, if this situation with the judicial system that is controlled by the government and is used to monopolize power, many people that are outside of Venezuela, you're talking about 9 million people, they still have the fear to come back. I receive many calls every day from people that are outside of Venezuela asking me if they can return. I always say, yeah, you can, but I cannot actually secure. I'm not secure. I cannot give you like for sure the confirmation that nothing will happen to you. So people, there is still fear, and more importantly, if you still have this monster there, if you still have this fear there that you can be jailed or you can be persecuted, of course, what happened is these people that are the opponent.
Okay. Well, we will hear more from Alfredo Romero later. But now it's about time to welcome our panel to the stage. Sonia Zapata, she is coordinator for Foro Penal here in Norway and also the founder of the Norwegian Venezuelan Justice Alliance. And we also have Frank Konde Tangberg. He represents Amnesty International Norway. He's political advisor there. Please give them a warm welcome. I want to start with you, Sonia. As I said, introducing you, you represent Foro Penal here in Norway. And can you tell us a little bit about how you work to support Foro Penal from abroad? We see that they still have work to do on the ground.
Can you hear me? Yes. Yes, I mean, I could start actually with why do we do this? Why do we speak from abroad about Foro Penal and their work? And it's in simple terms, is what we do and what diaspora organizations, Venezuelan diaspora organizations do abroad, and what civil society movements do internationally, like the network of international chapters of Foro Penal. do is to give a voice to the people in Venezuela that are not able to speak up for themselves. The authoritarian regimes, as we all know, are very good at crushing dissent and putting off the voices, the critical voices, and those who dare to speak up by detaining them, by persecuting them, stigmatizing them, in the worst cases, detaining them, torturing them, and even killing them. And something similar happens with the organizations that are working to defend the victims of these abuses. They are subject to all kind of threats sometimes, and a number of other techniques that they have to actually also silence these organizations. And that includes anything from like threatening their leaders to, in some cases, enacting legislation, for example, that really is limits a lot their capacity to work and to defend the victims. So what they do and how do they get away with it? They get away with it because they operate in an ecosystem of pure impunity and zero accountability within the boundaries of their territories. And that is where the work of the diaspora and the work of civil society abroad plays a critical role, because obviously being beyond the physical reach of the regime, at least immediate physical reach, we are in a stronger position to speak up for the victims and for the human rights organizations working on the ground. And I guess that's also what Amnesty does in their network. So we are in a better position and a safer and more effective position to raise these issues abroad and to draw international attention and visibility to all these violations and abuses. This is, however, not risk-free, and we know, unfortunately, that there is they call transnational repression. We have seen cases of transnational repression in Venezuela, cases of activists that have been attacked, and even in one case assassinated for doing this type of work. This has happened in Colombia, just to mention the most recent ones, and farther back in time in Chile. So it's not a risk-free situation, but for sure we are in a better position than those working on the ground. So how do we work? We do advocacy work, and we build bridges and build alliances internationally to put pressure on the regime to take several types of action. So international support is critical for us and for any human rights activists working in authoritarian states. We do this in all the countries where we have a presence. In Foro Penal, we have international chapters in around 26 to 30 countries. I'm not sure right now. Those are 26 international chapters. The largest presence of Foro Penal internationally is in the Americas region, but we do have a few other chapters in Europe, Norway, and Spain being some of the two oldest ones. So we established the chapter in Norway back in 2018 or 17, I'm not quite sure right now. We are now working on establishing another one in Bergen when it comes to Norway, but we also have in Europe chapters in the Netherlands, in Germany, and in Hungary. Those are the ones I remember right now. Examples of what we do. Our work, again, is simply put, raise awareness of the human rights violations and crimes against humanity that are committed in Venezuela, and draw attention and visibility and support to the, in this case, Foro Penal, the organization that is defending the victims of these abuses. And Foro Penal has a specific focus on political persecution and repression, so that's what we work mostly about. And that, as it comes to that's our role, and our goal is to ensure that these issues are remain in the agenda of the governments, of the multilateral bodies, and civil society. So just to close on the, as examples in Norway, when it comes to governments, we have been in an open dialogue with the Norwegian government for many years now. It's a very open and honest dialogue where we push a lot for statements condemning the human rights violations. unfortunately not necessarily get what we want in the past at least, but this has changed slightly in recent, since last year, so that's a positive trend. And we put for pressure and we document these abuses relying on the reports of Foro Penal, which are, by the way, reports that are looked at and quoted and used by UN human rights mechanisms and all UN, all major human rights organizations around the world. That's governments. We have also been in touch with other parts of the Norwegian government and the parliament. We've also tried to give information to the intelligence branch of the immigration authorities, basically just provide them with updates about the repression situation in Venezuela that they use in order to forward to the case handlers that are dealing with asylum requests, Venezuelan asylum requests in Norway. And we liaise with civil society, so we are always reaching out to organizations that are working on the Venezuelan human rights situation. Here to my right is the best example of that and one of our best allies. I will already thank you publicly for that. It's been a great support working with Amnesty in Norway, especially with Frank's arrival on this. And we try to reach out depending on topics. For example, in the context of the 2024 elections, there was a point in time when more than 150 children or minors, let's be just more specific and precise, minors were detained. And so we reached out, for example, to UNICEF Norway and tried to see if they could help with statements and condemnation of that, asking for the release of those minors. In civil society also we have good relations with academics, and we have had a lot of support from the academic world. There are quite a few very knowledgeable professors in the University of Oslo and the University of Bergen that have been a great support for us, and also the Christian Michelsen Institute and a space. They have kind of a collaboration together called Bergen Global, where we have been invited to talk a few times, so we're very grateful for that type of space to denounce what is happening. So that's more or less what we do: lobbying, building relationships. We run campaigns, sign petitions, and do whatever it takes to make sure that the victims of human rights violations in Venezuela are not forgotten, and that the work of Foro Penal receives the attention, visibility, and support that they deserve.
So over to you, Frank. Can you just give us a short or picture of what Amnesty International has found in their investigations? Because you are one of the human rights organizations, the international ones, that are actually on the ground in Venezuela. So just a short recap of what your people in Venezuela are finding when they investigate.
Sure. So Venezuela has a multidimensional crisis. It's an economic crisis, a humanitarian crisis, but it's also a human rights crisis. So it's one of the few countries, it's the only country in the Americas which is under an active investigation by the International Criminal Court for crimes against humanity, meaning that we have a widespread and systematic attack on the population with certain crimes being committed. And there's sort of two main patterns that I want to focus on. One is at different junctures in time over the last decade plus. We've seen a crackdown on mass protests. So the use of indiscriminate force, mass arrests, enforced disappearances, and the use of torture of those who are imprisoned when people go to the street and exercise the right to protest. So that's one sort of characteristic. We've seen that in 2014, in 2017, 19, 24, etc. Sometimes more serious than others. And then you see that it's not only the security apparatus of the state, but also armed civilian groups called colectivos that exercise a social control. And then in periods of relative calm, you see that they have a more targeted political persecution, where they go to your home, to your place of work, and they arrest you. And what's common in both circumstances is that there's no due process in what goes on afterwards. So as long as you're considered to be a critic of the government, then you can be arrested. Often that is followed by a short-term enforced disappearance, which means that your family, your lawyer, will not be able to find you in the system. And
Exactly as Alfredo Romero
Exactly.
talked about.
and that's gone on for a long time as well. Then you're at huge risk of torture when that occurs. And then several things can happen. Either your case advances and you're charged with something very serious. It could be for defending human rights. It can be a terrorism charge. And you can face decades in prison. Otherwise, your case might stall and never advance. And you never know what's going to happen. So you have those different circumstances. And it's difficult to get a lawyer of your choosing, to get necessary legal assistance, to get food and health services in prison. If you've been tortured, that is of course vital that you get health services. You don't necessarily. And then the prison conditions as a whole are often inhumane and amount to torture in themselves. And as Sonia mentioned, that can also happen to kids, right? So people under 18, under very young age, are taken to the street. So it's a very serious situation, and
And from your point of view, how has the situation changed after the arrest of Maduro and the U.S. intervention in January?
yeah, Alfredo touched on it, but I want to go a bit further back because remember when in the fall of 2025, the Americans started to bomb boats in the Caribbean and in the Pacific, and they didn't show any evidence. That they just said that they are smuggling drugs. And they're coming from Venezuela and other places, and it needs to be sorted. And then they started to use a discourse that, you know, the US is under invasion, and they were framing this as a defensive measure. And then January 3rd comes, and they framed that attack on Venezuela as a law enforcement operation. They arrest Maduro, and Maduro is charged with different crimes in the US. Delcy Rodriguez becomes interim president. And then you have a period of uncertainty. Some people were optimistic, some people were celebrating, but there was a lot of uncertainty about what would happen. We were really concerned that the government would use the attacks, as a basis for more repression, and sort of to knuckle down and double down on their efforts. The rest of the government remained intact, the apparatus remained intact, the policy of repression has remained intact. They adopted a state of emergency, which allowed them to pursue anybody who voiced support or somehow supported the American attacks. That is something that could develop into a witch hunt, right? And then you've seen that the Americans, sometimes they've been talking about human rights, sometimes they haven't, but it took some time before they started to portray any sort of plan. But basically, they're telling the Venezuelan government that, you know, you're allowed to govern with a gun to your head. But they've voiced, well, it seems that their priority is to get private investors to be able to invest in the oil industry, in the mineral industry, not so much human rights. The government or the authorities have adopted an amnesty law, and they did start to release hundreds of prisoners, which sort of, there was cause for optimism, right? Could this go the right way? And for a lot of people, that was very positive. However, after the amnesty law was adopted, we seemed that the releases of prisoners has slowed down, almost stopped. And you have thousands of people outside of prison who have been released, who have charges pending against them, who also face an insecure future. So there's still this arbitrariness to the application of the law, because Parliament and the judicial system is controlled by people in government, and they're allied with people in government. So people in prison still face a lot of insecurity. The mothers, the sisters, and everybody who are waiting outside of the prisons, they're now even, I saw images from Rodeo Uno, which is one of the prisons. People are climbing up the hill, screaming inside to the prison to get news from those who are incarcerated, their family members and so on. So they have to scream outside of the prison because you can't get information through the normal routes, which would be during visiting hours. So it's a very, very dangerous situation. And remember, the victims have the right to truth, to what happened, to justice, to to reparations and guarantees of non-repetition. And none of this have been complied with.
You mentioned that Venezuela is under investigation in the International Criminal Court. I'm curious about how you see that the cases against Maduro now in New York might affect that investigation. I mean, is it good news or bad news for human rights?
So the charges against Maduro have to do with narcotics, terrorism, narco-terrorism, and weapons. It's not a human rights case. While the International Criminal Court has an open investigation, but it hasn't issued arrest warrants, right? So the case has been on standby for some time. There's an active investigation, but we don't know much about how far it's gotten along. And the United States is not supporting the court. It's actually actively working against it, sanctioning the court for its role in issuing arrest warrants against Israeli politicians. So the United States is not really doing what needs to be done to advance the rights of the victims here. Remember, truth, justice, reparations, and so on. It would be better of the United States to support the Inter-American Court and put its full weight behind it to make sure it has the resources to advance the case. Also, in the Human Rights Council in the UN, there's a mission that is investigating human rights abuses in Venezuela. The United States has dismantled its aid program, cutting UN funding, which has left that mission also without necessary funds. So the US is not really playing a productive role in advancing human rights.
So your answer is that it might be bad news for human rights when it comes to
I think they've left the people of Venezuela to fend for themselves, to fight for their own rights. So you see there's been sort of an opening of civic space, not through any sort of strong legal measures, but people are taking to the streets and exercising their rights, and they do so with a certain degree of risk now.
Yeah. Do you want to comment on that, Sonia?
Yeah, I might just want to add something and perhaps another subtle perspective to that. I totally agree what you're saying in terms of is it good news for human rights as such. It really isn't, like Frank just explained, because the trial in the US is subject to US rules, and the nature of the crimes is transnational organized crimes. It will follow that procedure under US legislation, and that has nothing to do with the current process at the International Criminal Court for crimes against humanity. Having said that, and this is something I think might have an impact in a positive way, very indirectly, in the sense that for many years Venezuelans saw that the regime could get away with basically anything, and that after many years of impunity, corruption, and a total anarchy, there is finally someone, and it happens to be the head of that regime, that is finally facing justice. That, I think, has had a positive effect, perhaps also in terms of deterrence, as a warning for other regime officials that are currently in the position to have to repress people. So I do think that maybe that's had that type of effect in the sense that it's a warning to them now that they are not invincible, that they will not get away with everything forever, even if the case in the US has a totally different nature.
I think maybe what you're saying is that, like Sonia's saying, the US intervention does put pressure on the regime and the authorities, and they have always used political prisoners as a bargaining tool. This is not the first time. It's not the first situation where they have to release some people to show, that they're taking steps. So now they've released people. They've adopted an amnesty law, but I think they're doing as little as they have to in order to show some willingness to change while retaining power.
Appearances,
very much.
You mentioned, Sonia, that one of the things you're trying to do is to make people aware of the situation in Venezuela and to talk to governments about it. And It was obvious in December that the Nobel Peace Prize and everything that happened around Maria Corina Machado shed some light on the situation in Venezuela. But now that has faded quite a lot since December. And does that affect your work and your ability to achieve something on behalf of political prisoners in Venezuela?
Yeah,
Attention.
media attention, you mean, right?
Yeah.
Media attention is critical for our cause, and you probably agree with that, because the whole point is to put pressure. And so when the lights are off and the attention is no longer there, then these regimes, and in case Venezuela, are finding much easier to get away with things if they believe that nobody's watching. So it does have some sort of, it somehow undermines human rights work and the work for justice. And this can be seen in various ways. First of all, repression, because as I just said, when they believe that nobody is watching, they are going back to their repressive practices. Also, that kind of silence in the media can have a demoralizing effect on the victims that feel that nobody cares anymore, and this is pervasive effect that sort of slows down the internal struggle and fight for justice. In addition to that, there is the issue of resources. When there is this type of, when this is no longer in the media, then the perception is created that things are perhaps not as urgent anymore, or that there is some sense of normalization. And when that happens, then our international allies that have been providing support shift their resources and attention to other conflicts, which is exactly what we're seeing now, that they believe or are more urgent in their perception. So we lose a bit that type of support, because it isn't perceived to be that urgent anymore. Another consequence of losing media attention is that the regime, when they see these vacuums of information, take good opportunities to then impose their own narrative and to spread their own propaganda, which is a bit what we're talking about when we say appearances, and what they're doing really well. They're very good at that, and filling these media and information vacuums with their own narrative, such as, look, we have an amnesty law, so we really are working here to promote peace and to have a reconciliation, all of which is just a facade. It's not happening. So media is critical for this, and I have to say I'm grateful to the Norwegian media outlets that have dedicated reports about Venezuela and that have kept Venezuela in their agenda, and I would encourage them to continue doing so. At the beginning, as Alfredo was mentioning, it has been a lot of fear to talk to the media in Venezuela. So when we were going through the Nobel Peace Prize and then the capture, we were approached by many Norwegian media outlets asking, we want to interview some of the victims, but we really did a good job trying to find victims that were willing to talk. The fear was way too high, not even on an anonymous basis. That has changed. And some victims, meaning, for example, political prisoners that have already been released, are more and more willing to talk. Also, the relatives of political prisoners that are still in prison are willing, and not only willing, but even eager to tell their story. So I would encourage the media to pick up on those and to go and interview. And Foro Penal has obviously a lot of connections and relations to these prisoners, because we advise them locally. So we could facilitate that type of approach and a contact so that they can do that.
We talked about earlier about the boats and the bombing of the boats outside of Venezuela, and those bombings made the headlines before Christmas, but they're still going on, but we don't read about it anymore. Why is that, Frank?
I suppose it's yesterday's news. I think a bombing happened yesterday. I saw in VG. 4 people were killed, if the report is correct. And the Americans, they publish the information themselves on social media. So it's really absurd what they're doing there. So if you suspect somebody of trafficking drugs, you can't just kill them. Imagine if the police in Norway said, okay, we think that somebody is carrying drug on the street, let's just shoot him, right? You can't do that. But Trump and his administration have sort of an erratic approach to security policy, to say the least, and they're doing so many things that have disastrous consequences for the world. So, and the way they communicate on social media, it's difficult to maintain attention to one issue and to pursue that issue over time. So yeah, that was something that the media followed, with some rigor before the turn of the new year, but the attacks have continued. So it should still be investigated because these are extrajudicial executions.
Okay, so here at the Nobel Peace Center, we're always trying to find hope and solutions when we investigate topics like this. And I want to get to that now as we're coming towards the end of the conversation. Is there any way of seeing how we can achieve what you know, justice and
truth, justice, and reparation.
And reparation for political prisoners and all the families, everybody around. It's not just the 400 something political prisoners we're talking about here. It's a lot more people involved in this.
Yeah.
What will it take to achieve that in Venezuela? And are we anywhere moving towards it, the way you see things evolving now?
I think hope has always been with the Venezuelan people. It hasn't been with a foreign intervention. Yes, they need international solidarity, they need support, they might need support from international justice mechanisms, but it's always been with the Venezuelan people. That's always the case. Right now, Alfredo touched on it. I think since there is some pressure on the Venezuelan authorities, you do see a change in people's attitude, like Sonia was touching on. People that would have initially been afraid, it could be the people who were released from prison. For example, we've spoken a lot to one who was a former prisoner of conscience, a journalist, Carlos Julia Rojas. He was arrested and accused of being involved in an attempt on Maduro, right? He was released. In the beginning, he said, my release is conditional, so I can't speak to the media. And I was trying to help Norwegian journalists get in touch with him, and maybe he could share his stories. He would have to be silent and let his wife speak while he was sitting next to her. He changed his mind at some point and said, no, it's torture for a journalist to be silent, he said. I have to speak. And now I see him running around in the streets of Caracas protesting, is really exercising his agency, right? And I think that's, you saw the mothers who have their sons and daughters in prison, they're outside the prisons protesting. So people are really exercising pressure on the government, and I think that's where the hope lies, that resistance from the people. And that can have really profound changes in society.
Do you see that movement growing now, Sonia, of people daring to speak out?
I see people who are not going to give up. So in that sense, there is no doubt in my mind that we are going to get there. Because as you say, the Venezuelans have shown such a great amount of resilience and courage. And people really feel very strongly about democracy. So democracy is going to be there, whether it is within reach and how immediately that's going to happen, that is the question. But I don't think Venezuelans are giving up. They haven't done it, and they have been subject to the most brutal regime in Latin American modern times. So it is really remarkable. It's not something that just happened 10 years ago. We're talking about 2 decades of repression. And we're still standing, we still see mothers, sisters, wives, people. So it is, the situation is still very bad. I have to say I'm not very optimistic when it comes to the short term. I think it's a bit naive to think that we're going to get justice delivered in the hands of those who have been undermining it for so long. So it will require a political change to actually be able to talk about, democracy, restoration of the rule of law, and independent judicial system, and ultimately peace. I don't see that happening immediately, to be honest.
And how could political change happen? I mean, we have...
Yeah, it's like the chicken and the egg in a way, right? Because ideally it should happen through elections, right? And that is a bit what is in the agenda right now, because elections Venezuelans want to vote. Venezuelans want elections. That has already happened many times. We have not only been able to put up elections entirely run by civil society and winning, like it happened in 2024, winning a presidential election that has been organized only by civil society, and winning by a landslide with all kind of obstacles. But it's also been, sorry, I saw, like, are we over time?
No.
So where was I?
Elections.
2024.
And
yeah,
how,
so we have that dilemma, right? Because on one hand, I don't see elections happening with exactly the same electoral body, that instead of overseeing the transparency and fairness of the elections and guaranteeing the results, are actually enabling the fraud. And I don't see an election happening where the Supreme Court is actually validating the fraud, or where the military and all the law enforcement agencies, when people go outside and protest because there has been a fraud, they repress them, they incarcerate them, and they torture them. And on top of that, just recently we had a new ombudsman and a new prosecutor, 100% loyalists of the regime. So we don't have that. So until those pillars of the justice system and of the law enforcement system are there and suffer a very radical structural reform, I don't see that. I see the comeback of democracy has a very low chance of succeeding. This has to change. And it's a dilemma, because on the other hand, we want elections as soon as possible, because we know that the regime, there is something they're very good at, is winning time, using time in their favor. So the more time we take for elections, the more they encroach themselves in power. That is what we need to balance here. So it's really, really complex.
And the Nobel Peace Prize laureate, Maria Corina Machado, she was the one who won the previous election by a landslide, but was not
someone
able
that
to...
she kind of nominated, right? Because she
Yeah,
was not
she
allowed
was
to run.
The force behind the election system that made it possible for the opposition to win. And how do you see, what could happen if she returns now?
Well, I think Alfredo already predicted that is quite a risky thing. I mean, they have already been publicly threatening her that if she comes back, she was going to be put in jail, right? Because she has been, and you were mentioning an interview in El País before we got here, that I haven't seen that one, but I know, and I saw a short video of Rodriguez saying that if she comes, she's gonna put into jail because she has been somehow involved in asking for a foreign intervention. So this is what they're saying. So it is very risky for her to do that. I don't know how you see it, Frank.
No, she's obviously at great risk if she returns to Venezuela. She's proven tremendously brave, right? She has really stood at the forefront of protest and public mobilization for a long time now. And people in Venezuela want her to come home, I assume. But I think they also understand the situation that she finds herself in. If she decides to go back, it will be interesting to see how the authorities respond. They've said in an interview, the Speaker of the Parliament and the President's brother said, that she has advocated for armed intervention in Venezuela, and therefore the amnesty law won't apply to her. But obviously she has close relationships with the government of the United States. They hold the key. If she decides to go back, and they put her in prison, then I think the American authorities have some decisions to make. So yeah, that could really be an inflection point, I think, if she does that. But people who are forcibly returned to Venezuela are at great risk, and there are no guarantees for those who decide to voluntarily travel back.
We still have to keep attention. I was wondering now if we still have Alfredo Romero with us from Caracas. I would love to hear your answer to that question. If justice and democracy, how do you see the possibility of that being in reach now for Venezuelans?
Well, I think there is a possibility. As I was saying, we feel some way positive. However, without justice and without independent justice and without independent institutions, democracy is not something easy to obtain. But again, what you do first, I don't know. I mean, for example, we're talking about a political opposition to return to Venezuela or people to return to Venezuela, but people they can be persecuted. But on the other hand, if they don't return, there is no participation and there is not a possibility of doing anything. So this is something that should happen. I mean, where is the dilemma of the chicken and the egg? So I think Venezuelans have to come back. Venezuelans have to participate. Venezuelans have to become involved in the situation in order to have transition. But if you see it like the picture right now, of course, there is not a judicial system that guarantees, like, for example, free elections and a free, I would say, transition to democracy.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Alfredo. And thank you, Frank Conde Tandberg and Sonia Zapata. This has been very, very interesting, and I think it's up to all of us now to keep attention on Venezuela and not forget about the situation for the people on the ground there. Thank you all so much for coming, and give all of them a big hand. I hope Alfredo can hear the applause as well. And to all of you, thank you for being here, and welcome back to the Nobel Peace Center. There are a lot of things going on. Make sure to follow us on social media or sign up to our newsletter, not to miss any of our events. So have a peaceful evening and welcome back.